Welcome to COWL Fans, the casual fans' home for Overwatch League news. We're coming at you from Tampa, Florida. I'm your host, Aluramore.
I'm Howleir.
And we have got a show for you this week because that's what we do. Not.
Would you believe it?
Not for any other reason. Oh man, it was a more fun week of Overwatch than we expected.
For sure.
But I do have to say that in spite of that, all of our expectations that we set up last week were met.
Yeah.
And because really we only set up one expectation last week. That expectation was the Mayhem versus the Valiant game is going to be the most interesting game that week. True.
At least in North America, definitely true.
True, yeah. So we're just gonna jump right in there to our hometown boys. And then the Mayhem versus the Valiant, we went to 4 maps. The scoreline came out 3-1 in favor of the Valiant, and they were honestly pretty close maps every single time.
Yeah, Control and Assault felt a little lopsided in the Valiant's favor.
Yeah.
But the Escort and Hybrid maps were absolutely bonkers insane close.
Yes.
Like 2v2s, like Tracer v Lucio are like the only people left. Just ridiculous fights coming down to the absolute wire, to like the smallest mistake is making the difference of who comes out on top or who just happens to get that extra crazy clutch in any given team fight. It was one of the more insane matches I can recall in recent memory, Melee included. It just insane individual plays from every single player on the server throughout the entire game. Just absurd Overwatch.
It's true, and I think the desk really did a good job of capturing sort of what we were seeing in their post-game analysis, because we saw the Valiant's DPS lineup kind of getting the upper hand of the Mayhem's DPS lineup. KSP really had his way and forced BQB to do what he wanted to do to play his game. And BQB really didn't have a choice. He was being manhandled by KSP. But on the other side of that, Gargoyle and Fate were doing an excellent job and the tank line of bullying the other team's tank lines and really setting them up for failure, making them play the Mayhem's game. So there was a lot of push and pull here.
Yes.
A lot of push and pull here. I agree with you pretty heavily on the not assault, control map.
Yeah.
The control map probably didn't feel as one-sided as assault did when I was watching it. But the Mayhem pulled out a pretty strange composition for control. And I'm not sure how good of an idea that was.
It's not as absurd as you might think. Definitely in North America, but what they played, especially on Night Market,
right?
The first point or the first round was very standard in Asia.
Sure.
So it's not like it's without precedence.
Yeah. I figured as much, but the way that the other team...
Ana was weird, but that's it.
Right. But the way that Valiant was sort of manhandling them through that entire situation, even when they did manage to grab the point, they didn't manage to hold on to it for very long at all. In fact, they got off the point several times, which I have to say I'm pretty disappointed in them about throughout the entire series. And it felt like they were in the middle of a team fight, and they just weren't standing on that control point. And I'm not sure how much of that was actually because they got off the point, or how much of that was the Valiant pushing them off of the point, right?
Yeah.
Because it did feel, like I said, like they were being handled pretty intensely. So maybe not entirely their fault, but it did feel like their composition was the weaker of the compositions, and it really felt like that's what lost them that control match.
Yeah, it definitely didn't feel like we quite executed it to the right level. Our first fight was decent. We traded out like 3 kills for 3 kills.
Mm-hmm.
With the Valiant, just the players that they had left had more staying power on point, so they're able to just kind of, you know, get the objective based off of that. And that's always that's the reason why you don't really see as much dive, right? There's a reason why you haven't seen this comp as much in North America like you have in Asia.
Right.
There's just it's high risk, high reward, and we felt Chris didn't feel super comfortable on the Mercy. I felt like
Yep.
He got picked off often, and then I don't remember who Gargoyle was on. Well, as far as his tank, he was the Wrecking Ball. Was he Wrecking Ball or Zarya?
I don't think he was Zarya. I think he might have been right.
Wrecking Ball, right? And Fate was on the Winston.
We didn't get a lot done.
I didn't feel like he made that much of an impact. And especially considering the next map we had him on Reinhardt, I almost would have rather had Karyan in and see him on the ball on Reinhardt if like our plan was to play 2 main tanks.
Right.
In the off tank role for at least 2 of the rounds. We didn't get to see the third, so we don't know what they would have done then.
Right.
But I might have liked to see Karyan in instead. But it felt like, the first map, it's just our dive didn't work out. And then the second map, the Junkrat pretty hard countered our Reaper strat that we had with BQB. Like, he couldn't really get anything done, and we were, I'd say, too slow to change, but we didn't change at all, right?
Right.
Like, somebody needed a shot call and say, okay, this isn't what we expected to be running into. Our comp is being pretty hard countered. Let's switch something up.
Yeah, nobody really expected to see a Junkrat there.
Yeah.
Which, honestly, props to Valiant for coming up with such a smart composition for that particular section to know how to go around that. I mean, talk about getting around a Mei wall. You want to get around a Mei wall, just throw a grenade over top of it. It's perfect.
And that felt like VOD review, good VOD review too, because we've run that composition on Lijiang in the past.
Mm-hmm.
Just as recently as the Mei Melee, right? So Valiant ran out with this comp designed to counter what we were running, and we ran it, you know.
Yeah.
So, and we didn't make the adjustments. So good coaching, and a lot of that match did feel like good coaching from the LA Valiant side. I do think that a Florida fan shouldn't be super discouraged. Like, I do think in a different hero pool, Florida easily could have won this match. I think this match easily could have went to 5 and even been won by the Florida Mayhem. It was that close of a match, particularly Hollywood. Very easily could have been ours.
Yeah.
It was on a knife's edge, but bad hero pool for us. And then just the coaching, the way they utilized Rain was one of 2 X factors for me in this matchup against us, or not Rain, Lastro, excuse me. But the way they played with their Zen was almost poetic in the way that it beat us, because the way they played their Zenyatta is the way we pioneered playing Brig.
Okay.
So it was like they took our own strategy that kind of changed how Overwatch is played. One of our biggest contribution to the Overwatch team this year has been having a support go with your flankers. Usually it'd be an off tank who goes with your flankers. You still see that a lot.
Right.
But having like a solo support kind of go and support a flanker wasn't really done before Chris and BQB started doing it with Brig, and then Chris and Yaki later once Mei Melee started happening and we were running the Tracer.
Right.
So that's something we really pioneered in the Overwatch scene, and now we had them do Zen with their Tracer almost all the time on these weird flanks and cross angles, and we had a lot of trouble getting to the Zenyatta because of the crossfire they had set up to protect him, and Shax would instantly go back to protect his Zen because he he's relying on the Harmony Orb, but B, he knows he has the advantage because if you're going for the Zen, he can Discord you, and
Right.
now he has the upper hand in the 1v1.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we just weren't really expecting that. You didn't see it all weekend, really, from any other team playing their Zenyatta like that. So it's not something we would have scrimmed for or prepared for. And it was just a really good read on the meta from the LA Valiant.
I think you're very correct about that. So, really good game. Highly recommend if you didn't get to catch it, you go back and watch it. But you know what? It was just close. It was close.
It was just really close, and it ultimately came down to smart strategies. And then Valiant in a double hit scan meta, they had the perfect hero pool for us. And I already discussed in the last podcast of why this isn't a good hero pool for us, right?
Yeah, I think we talked about that 2 weeks ago.
They had Widow maps all the time. Like you said, BQB had to play KSP's games.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of that was the map pool. If we had gotten maps like King's Row,
we might have been talking a different story.
Would have been a lot more dominant.
Yeah.
They don't have a Mei. That's one of LA's big weaknesses. If we could have gotten to a map where Mei is really strong, they would have struggled a lot more.
Yeah.
So, just it was a quality loss. I think there's a lot for us to learn from this, and we're only going to be a better team if we do the VOD review right. And I think if we did come in and encounter LA Valiant in the Summer Showdown, I don't take this match as Valiant's definitely better than Mayhem. I think we're almost equal. I consider like Mayhem and Valiant to be pretty solidly like third and fourth, if not second and third, depending on how Fusion decides to show up in the next couple weeks. But they're pretty neck and neck. So
yeah,
anyone's game on any given day, I think.
It really is. It really is. So we have a couple of things that happened in the APAC region that probably most of the casual fans didn't get up at 4 a.m. to watch. So
I also didn't, but I did go back and watch the VODs.
Right.
So the biggest storyline in Asia this weekend was the Hangzhou Spark. And we had a little bit of a build up to that as well, even before we hit the servers Saturday morning, right? There were some big signings out of the Hangzhou Spark that made them the team to watch, even before the game started. So first of all, it was a couple weeks ago now, I think, is when they announced that they picked up Architect from the Shock. So already a big hole being filled for this team, because one of my biggest complaints, and I know I've brought it up on the show in the past, is that like Godsby is really good, and this is a really good Spark roster, but it always felt like the other DPS never pulled their weight.
Right.
Maybe the only exception being Bozzy's Doomfist during the playoffs of last year. Otherwise, Bozzy and Adora never felt like OWL caliber DPS players.
Yeah.
And that always hindered the Spark from really reaching that top excellence. They were never bad. Well, they were bad at like stage 1, stage 2. But for the most part, this team was always pretty all right, if not great, but they were never just that top contender. And that was always one of the big things keeping them from being there, because they can never just match a team like Shock on all 6 roles. You had that glaring weakness. And then with Rhea's wrist injury, we haven't seen much Rhea, who was excellent last year. And then we've just had Sasin, Sasin is I've always known him as a Pharah player, and he's done okay trying to play off tank, but that was never his strong suit, right?
Right.
And you really felt the off tank difference all of this year. When the Hangzhou Spark would be going up against other teams. So now they've picked up QOQ, which is probably was the biggest non-pickup of the off-season. Everyone assumed QOQ was going to be starting in the Overwatch League this year. He was on the former Runaway squad, which is Yaki and Gangnam Jin, Hisu, and Ijegon. All on amazing teams, by the way. Florida, Shanghai Infusion.
Right.
So, like a really strong caliber tank. And they went into these matches and they looked extremely good. So they played New York and Guangzhou this week. So probably your top two teams that aren't named Shanghai Dragons in the Asia region. And these were some bangers of a match. The match against New York went to 6 maps. And then the match against Guangzhou went to the full 5. And it was just an amazing showing, particularly from the 2 new additions. The match against New York was the Architect show. The dude was just a monster on every hero that you got to see him on, and you really got to feel the terror of an Architect Godsby DPS line. They're incredibly flexible. Both of them can play projectile and hit scan heroes, which is pretty rare for any single DPS, let alone 2 DPS on the same team. You don't get that very often.
Right.
And it was an insane match. I really liked the New York versus Spark one too, because it was different. It was a battle of styles, which I know is something that you always enjoy as well in Overwatch. Getting to see teams' colors kind of clash and see who comes out on top. Because New York, despite their like, especially when they were playing in North America during the actual like physical homestands, they were adopting a very hyper aggro style.
Yes.
New York has reeled that back, and they're back to being a very defensive style like they used to play.
Right.
Favoring May compositions, a lot of slower comps where Hangzhou was like dive, high tempo. Our comp that we played on Night Market, they played a lot on control maps, the Pharah Tracer setups with the Winston ball dive. So it was like cool, this high tempo in your face versus a very slow reserve style of New York, very controlled, meticulous. And it was a joy to watch. And Architect popped off hard in that match, and then the next map, it felt a lot like the Florida Valiant map, where Happy was getting to play Widowmaker on a lot of Widowmaker maps, making Godsby very uncomfortable, having to switch off the Ashe and go onto the Widow to try to keep up with Happy, and Happy was just redonkulous.
Right.
But that became the QOQ show. QOQ really stepped up, kind of like Gargoyle did against the LA Valiant, and was just really, really excellent for a rookie. His rookie weekend, right? It was his debut performance, basically, the day after his debut, and he did have a few mistakes in that first game. He fixed like all of them and came out as probably, if Spark won that match, he probably would have got player of the match. It was excellent. So this is their first weekend together. Like, they've only had QOQ for, I don't know how long they've been trialing him, but officially he's only been on the roster for like 3 or 4 days now. And if that's the kind of results they could put out after just their first week, probably together with Architect and QOQ, this team could be very, very good.
Yeah.
By the time actual playoffs roll around.
Yes. That's probably, honestly, something we haven't talked about enough, is we haven't really seen the different regions interact with each other at all for a while.
Yes.
I think that makes playoffs very interesting in a way that they haven't been in the past. So that should be really exciting, actually.
For sure.
But let's move on. Unless you're not done.
I was just going to say one quick note.
Okay,
just
hit me with a
Chengdu
quick
Hunters, get your life together. They got stomped by the London Spitfire, which is a match I watched, and it wasn't even close. And then the next day, Chengdu plays Shanghai and takes them to map 5. Like, I didn't watch that map because I had no expectations for it. I plan to go back and watch it today because what the heck? How did that happen? Because that was not the team I watched on Saturday. They looked hot garbage.
You know, it's probably worth noting we're talking about Clash of Styles. If anybody ever had a style, it was Chengdu. And, you know, I watched Florida take a style into their control map, and I watched that style get trounced by the other team.
Right.
So, you know, with Chengdu being so heavily stylized, it's extremely possible that that heavy stylization is meaning that some teams are always going to trounce them, and other even good teams they're always
Yeah,
going to put up a good fight against.
but Chengdu, if you watch Chengdu this year, they don't feel like the Chengdu of old. They actually feel pretty similar to the other Asian teams,
Okay.
maybe outside London and New York. The weird comps that Chengdu plays are the same weird comps that every team that's based in China
I gotcha.
plays. So Chengdu just randomly decides to actually play them really well. I don't understand.
Okay, then. I stand corrected. All right, so let's move back into North America here.
Yes.
And let's talk about the Houston Outlaws versus the Gladiators match, because I think it's safe to say we all anticipated the Gladiators winning that game.
Yes. I literally the Defiant match ended, which was Sado Depresso, but after that match, I was like, okay, well, the next two matches should be stomped. Let's go do something else. And
How'd that work out
it
for you?
was sort of a stomp, but not in the way you would have expected. I feel like it says a lot about both teams, honestly. I don't think it's necessarily like, oh, Gladiators suck. Totally. But I do think they're definitely on a downswing of things. Um, it was Houston playing very well.
Okay.
Houston just looked they were the better team, as the scoreline shows, right? From what I got to watch of the match, I didn't give it my full attention, but once I saw that they were winning, I did get intrigued. And this, I don't know if it's just a bad meta for LA, because they also looked confused last week as well. I talked about there was a weird LA meta.
Right.
Valiant grew up and joined everybody else with the meta and then put their own little twist on it. Gladiators still seemed like they were trying to play the meta, but they couldn't. And they only looked good when they went back to their weird Reinhardt LH Cloudy shenanigans. That was the one map they were able to pick up.
Sure.
So Gladiators felt really uncomfortable. They also brought in Kevster. I can't really say too much about his performance. I don't think I gave the match enough of my attention. But this really did feel like a meta that fit the Houston Outlaws. Blase hasn't really shown up this year, I don't think, outside of his Doomfist play. So to be able to have Linkser on like Widow and Ashe and have Dante on his Tracer was very, very comfortable for that team. I think even though Jexay has played very well, they had a big advantage in the double flex support meta with the Baptiste Zen. The Raucous and Repel looked very comfortable paired up together. And then having Hydration not have to play Winston and Reinhardt and be able to basically just play Ball and mostly Orisa.
Mm-hmm.
Those are Hydration's better main tanks, right? Like when Gladiators used to play Hydration on main tank, it was those two heroes. He never had to play the Reinhardt and the Winston, which he looks uncomfortable on when he has been forced onto it.
Right.
So good meta for Houston. It'll be interesting to see how they carry that into the future once this hero pool is gone. But it felt good to see Houston win, because I don't think they've really won since their upset over Paris, however long ago that was, back in April. So it was nice to see the potential of this team realized, because they do have so many good pieces. Like Meko's amazing, Dante is cracked. And just to kind of see this Houston Outlaws not be hot garbage, it was nice.
Yeah.
It's cool.
It's always nice to see these, professional teams look like professionals.
Yeah.
But speaking of teams that look like hot garbage, I have come up with an equation. I've created an equation here, okay?
Okay.
All right.
All right.
Dallas Fuel
Uh-huh.
minus Decay equals hot garbage.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
That seems fair.
and it's not Onigod's fault.
Oh no.
No, because so Dallas Fuel went up against the Vancouver Titans, effectively a tier 2 team.
Yep.
That has been showing significant improvement week to week. So let's not get down on the Titans, okay? Because they came up out of tier 2 last minute and have been growing in this tier 1 environment, which is impressive.
By the Toronto Defiant last weekend.
Right. They still did get swept by the Toronto Defiant last weekend. They're not amazing, okay? They're not exactly a good team here, okay? They're still a bad team. I just don't want to be railing on them for being a bad team. I don't think they deserve it at this point.
Sure.
But here they are. Dallas Fuel takes out Decay, puts in Onigod, which really should be a pretty good plug-and-play swap out.
It'll be okay enough.
Right. It should at least enough for, this Titans team.
Yeah.
And we learned that it's not. It's not enough for the Vancouver Titans team. The rest of the team, the rest of Decay's team cannot play without Decay.
Yeah.
It's very confusing because who was it? Backpack Matt, whoever the Twitter guy is who tweets out stats, tweeted out the stat and went, look at this, guys. Onigod didn't do a bad job in this Tracer game. He did a great job in this Tracer game. So, okay, we've got a great Tracer that played in there. But they still couldn't pull it off. Like, it's confusing. It's confusing how you could take a really great Tracer, replace him with a regularly great Tracer, and not come up with a win against a tier 2 team.
Yeah, I mean, Onigod did perform really, really well. The problem is that Decay has been inhuman.
Sure.
Right? And it's interesting to see when you take out someone who's on, like, what is Dallas? It's a bottom 5 team right now. And Decay is legitimately in the MVP conversation.
Yeah.
Like, it's stupid how good this boy has been. And so it was interesting to see you take out someone that ridiculously good. It's not even like you put in someone bad. And how just awful the Dallas Fuel look. And it doesn't make any sense. Okay. The one thing that doesn't make sense is a bad meta for this team. At least a bad meta for Doha. You ideally were wanting to run Onigod and Decay together. I understand wanting to give Decay a weekend off because this should have been a safe game.
Should have been.
The fact that it was not a safe game is very, very troubling.
It is. Yes, troubling.
And it doesn't fully make sense because Dallas has taken San Francisco Shop to map 5 this year. It's not like a different roster. I mean, maybe they had Closer instead of Paintbrush, but it doesn't make sense why this team isn't clicking. We know Gamsu and No can be great. We know that. We've seen it. They had the first perfect stage together. Crimso's stats all year have been excellent. And Crimso even was probably the second best player on the server after Onigod, if not the best. Like, I think out of all the players for Dallas Fuel, those were the 2 who did the best in that match. So it doesn't make sense why they're struggling as hard as they are, because their pieces don't feel.
Their pieces are great. They just can't, for whatever reason, fit them together. So, I feel like this is another this is a case that feels to me very similar to the Mayhem of old. You have
Right.
this Decay boy who is ridiculously inhumanly good, not unlike an old Saya player that I knew about once. Um, you have right? And then you have, but here's what they have that we didn't have, right? They have a good, solid relational head coach. We had a very good strategical head coach, but who lacked the relational side. I feel like Arrow maybe needs to get on a better strategy coach or maybe a better I don't remember what development coach. I don't remember exactly what they call that, but somebody whose
Right.
job is to develop actual gameplay styles for these players versus because Arrow I think does a good job bringing pieces in and giving them the tools they need to work with. But right now it feels like the tools that the players need to work with as far as coaching staff goes, they must
Mm.
not be getting them. Um,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Because I don't know what their situation is now. I remember like last year, if you remember, they had like a stupid amount of coaches. Like
Yeah,
there were a ton of cooks in that kitchen. They had role coaches. I think 2 to 3 assistant coaches on top of that, 2 Arrow. Like literally like an 8 to 10. Like their coaching staff was as big as their roster,
which I
which is
wouldn't.
should be good.
It's only good if there's a clear direction given, right?
Yep.
And that direction doesn't even necessarily need to come from Arrow. He needs to, in a coaching staff that size, I would expect him to have a right hand man whose job is to give more of the nitty gritties of the direction, and for Arrow to
Mm-hmm.
cast his vision to that guy, and that guy be like, oh yeah, I can translate that vision into action,
Mm-hmm.
and then that guy disseminates that action amongst the rest of the coaches. But you're right. I really don't know what their situation is, but whatever it is, these players are missing something, and it's not skill. They have skill.
Yeah. For sure.
So if it's not skill, then it's got to be some form of leadership, and maybe it's in-game leadership because we know these players are skilled, but we don't necessarily know how talented they are at leading while the game is going on. We've got a
Yeah.
lot of things that we just don't know, and we won't know and can't know, and so I can live with
Could be
that.
a bit of a communication breakdown too between like especially Doha
Mm-hmm.
in that match when he was like the only Korean, right? He didn't have Decay to kind of
Help.
communicate natively to.
Right. So we just need to they just need to sort of work some of that out
Yeah.
and figure that out. But the good news is Decay took a break, but Decay should be back. And so Dallas shouldn't
Yep.
stay a terrible team as long as Decay can hang out with them.
Well,
It's just bad that they need a single player has that much impact on this team.
yeah.
And we'll see how this goes because next week they get another shot at another low tier team, the Toronto Defiant, and they
Yep.
get to, sort of come up and go, hey guys, we put our best player on hold. It made us the worst. Our best player is back now. We're not actually the worst, we promise.
Mm-hmm.
And they need that very badly right now.
Yeah, because Toronto hasn't beat anybody other than the Titans in
And they just
quite a
lost, and
while.
the Fuel just lost to the Titans. So,
Yeah, so this is their chance. If they could beat that, if they could beat Defiant, it's like okay, that was a blip. You
yeah,
know,
yeah,
that was just an off day, bad meta, just unlucky, whatever you want to chalk it up to.
right. Just
But
let that one go.
at least give some fans some hopes, especially if you can make it convincing. Dallas Fuel, because I mean Dallas even took a map against Mayhem, so which is
Yeah,
not no small feat for a team that's bottom 5 in the standings, I do believe.
right.
So, like this Dallas team, there's so much potential, and it'd be nice to see them realize it because a lot of teams right now are starting to realize their potential, which is making the season very exciting. And Dallas should be able to be one of those teams, and I'd like to see them realize it.
Yeah, I think we all would. But as we move into next week, we have one game, the game that the fans have been crying out for.
Come on, yeah,
They
there's
want, they wanted it. They wanted it to be the finals of the May Melee, and Florida stepped in and said, "No, it will not be the finals of the May Melee." And
mm-hmm.
here is their chance. Here's their chance to show the fusion versus the shock. It's
Yes.
the game the fans want. The two best teams in NA, probably, maybe.
Maybe this is Philadelphia Fusion's chance to prove that they are one of the best two teams in NA, right?
Yeah.
Because we had been saying that all year, and then after the May Melee, there's a big question mark on that now. This is Fusion's chance to prove that was just a bad weekend for them. That was a bad matchup against Florida that they weren't prepared for. They underestimated us, whatever it was. But that's not what Philadelphia Fusion is. They can they can beat Shock, or they can go toe to toe with Shock, whatever kind of narrative they want to try to pull out. This is their chance to do it, right? They got to show up if they want to be seriously considered, because if it's anything less than close, I mean,
it's over.
Yeah, I mean, at least, how much, I don't know how much power rankings matter,
They
but
don't.
they're definitely going to fall below Valiant and Mayhem on them, right?
Right.
And they'll stop feeling like a championship contender, which is something they've been being hailed as since the off season.
Yeah.
So this is their chance. Put the proof.
I gotta say, I'm not as excited about this game as everybody else is. I'm not.
No?
I'm not. Because here's kind of... I got it. Let me just interpret this for you. Okay?
Okay.
The better version of our current Dallas Fuel is going against the best team in the league. The Fusion have always risen and fallen on the coattails of Carpe, a single player. And when Carpe's on, he can carry anything. I mean, Carpe can single-handedly win an entire game. But here's because we just watched the Fusion play up against the Boston Uprising. And I gotta say, the Boston Uprising played them closer than I anticipated. The Boston Uprising they were inches away from winning a map off of the Fusion. And you know the reason they didn't was because Carpe turned around and got like 4 kills. Because he's Carpe and he can do that. The same way Decay does that kind of junk for Dallas Fuel, right? It's exactly the same kind of look and the same kind of reliance on a single individual that I see out of the Fuel.
I disagree. I do think Fusion are pretty reliant on Carpe. Like, I will give you that. But I do, unlike Dallas Fuel, where almost nobody else has their moment, it's nothing but the Decay show. Like, even in the game against Shock, you saw Alarm just taking out the enemy Widowmaker across the map. Like, Alarm frags hard. Funny Astro is a little bit more muted when he's not on Lucio, but when Funny Astro is on Lucio, that guy can hard carry as well. Sato has had amazing moments on Reinhardt. Fury is statistically the best Sigma that we have in the league right now.
Right.
So there's a lot of quality
on
this Philadelphia Fusion squad. So I don't think they're as reliant on Carpe as like the 2019 and 2018 iterations of this team are. I definitely do think they're better.
Well, like I said,
I agree with you that when they're going up against the Shock, they will be a lot more reliant on Carpe to take them to the Shock's level.
Right. And so it's like I said, they're a much better version of what we see the Dallas Fuel right now.
So instead of being like, we are a 14th to 16th place team with Decay, but we're the worst in the league without him, this is more like, we're a 4th to 6th place team when Carpe isn't going crazy, but we're a title contender with
Carpe's in. Exactly. So it's one of those things where I'm like, you know what? If Carpe shows up, I'm going to be excited about the game. If Carpe doesn't show up, I'll probably turn it off. Because they'll probably, it's just, the Shock is a very good team. They've been consistently very good. I do not expect the Fusion to win if they're not firing on all cylinders.
Ons has been crazy too, so Carpe needs to show up because Ons is just disgusting right now.
Also, what should be a blast about all this is next week there will be no hero pools.
Yes.
So we'll get this game in a no hero pool situation, which...
No excuses.
No excuses. Same will go for Dallas versus Toronto. And you know what? It'll also go for Florida versus the Outlaws, as Florida comes up against a team coming off a high, as the Outlaws just beat Gladiators as in a significant upset, and that looked pretty convincing. Here's Florida coming out of getting, beaten up by the Valiant. Florida hasn't lost a game in a while, aside from that championship against the Shock, which I don't think has the same impact as losing a regular game against not the Shock.
Right.
Right. Florida went through the ringer and had to take out Philadelphia to get to the Shock.
Yep.
So
I think some fans have pushed the panic button, oh, same old Mayhem, we lost the Valiant.
I don't think we should push the panic button.
It's not time for that. Valiant are a very good team, but now, especially against the surging Outlaws, this is our chance to prove that we are a playoff team, that we're a top 8 total in the league, and that we deserve to be in the end of season playoffs, right?
Yes.
A surging team like the Outlaws is something that we need to beat. I think we have a really good shot at it, especially with hero pools being unlocked. I think that's going to hurt the Outlaws.
Yeah.
But I think this could be a better match than anticipated. If we do put them in the ground,
that's good.
That's going to be a great statement for Florida to be able to make. So I'm hoping that we don't underestimate Houston, especially after they just beat Gladiators, and we give them their fair respect.
But not too much like we were given to KSP.
Right.
Yeah.
Only if they deserve it.
Yeah. So it should be a good game. It's a good chance for Florida to show that they can arrest their mental decay as they come off a loss. You like that?
I think so. I don't know if I like it.
Yeah, they can show that they can, slow down their mental drop-off as they come off of a loss, because losses are hard, especially a regular season loss against a team that, after going toe-to-toe with the Shock and taking out the Fusion, people expected you to win. So it was close. I don't think it was, like you said, don't hit the panic button, but come off of that team, get your head in the game, go up against the Outlaws who are on the up. If your team on the down can hold up against the team on the up, you're in a good spot to be successful in the long term. So, which is just going to be about looking at that and seeing how that goes, and I think they have a good shot at it, and I'm hopeful, but I just they just gotta watch their mental game, which they've been doing a really good job at this season. I have to say, Florida's held their mental game very strongly this season in general. So I'm not extremely worried about that, but, to say I'm not worried at all about that would be a lie.
We haven't fully flushed the Florida Mayhem fan of old out of our system yet. This whole winning thing is all still new to us.
Yeah, exactly.
It's going to take a bit more until the ever-creeping doubt of we can lose to the worst team in the league in any moment out of our system.
Yeah, yeah.
Every match is going to come with a little bit of panic. Even when we were confident in them beating Boston, that felt weird as a Florida fan.
Yeah, it did. So that's our whole show today, though, man. That's everything we've got on our docket, and that's right on time. We don't even need filler content today.
Nope.
Wow, I prepared filler content just for you, our friends, and I'm not even going to get to use it.
I probably could have gone for another 10 minutes talking about Sparkle.
Yeah,
and about Spark. Straight up Spark. There's a lot of good matches this week, guys. If you can watch Overwatch, especially in the Asia region, there's going to be a lot of good games.
Hey, if you can watch Overwatch, you should watch Overwatch, because Overwatch is good. Howler.
Yeah.
That's a quote from you now. I attributed it to you.
Oh.
Did you like that?
Okay, I thought you were telling me you were.
No. You were like, if you could watch Overwatch, so I just sort of finished it for you. It seemed like something I ought to do.
Maybe don't watch Rain versus Vancouver. I think everything else should be pretty good.
Maybe watch Rain versus Vancouver if you're an Atlanta fan. You just want to feel good about yourself.
Yeah, that's true. After Florida beat you up, keep feeling good about your team beating up bad teams.
Yeah.
Though you did lose to Gladiators, who just got beat by Houston. So.
Rip. Mighty unfortunate.
Yikes.
All right, well, it should be a great next upcoming week of Overwatch. It was a good week this past week, and we can't wait to see it. But that's all of our time for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure to follow us on socials for our latest episodes at COWL Fans on Facebook and Twitter. We're available on YouTube, and we're working on migrating our podcast episodes, so bear with us still, because I'm very confused about it. I'm easily confused. All right, so thank you so much for those of you who have continued to stick with us. You can find us wherever. I already did all that. Okay. Man. Crushing it.
Dang.
All right, well, I'm Aluramore,
I'm Howleir.
and you have been tuned into COWL Fans. We will see you next week.